especially the one about Joseph. What questions does it stir up for you? Or emotions? There was a lot of smiling about family dynamics. I could see it. You can actually answer, not just smile. This deep desire to just be loved unconditionally, equally. It's like a core wound. And among the many things that I did while I was away, I meditated a lot. And the Buddha, in this practice of meditation, discerned that there are these two forms of suffering, and he calls the first the actual event, and the second suffering, calls the second arrow, it's the story we make up about our suffering. I see some head nods. And they're not the same thing, but we treat them as if they are. The suffering is the experience in the moment. And in the story, Joseph's terror gets worse. I'm going to share some of it with you. And the pain of his brothers also gets worse. And then there's the story they create about it, or Peter's terror, as a wave come crashing over his head and he's sinking. The story is what we build and attach to the experience after the fact. Sometimes it's only seconds after, sometimes it's decades after. The story that we create about our lives is a construct. And not many of us, it's not a moral issue. With the most raw, intense human experiences, especially with grief and terror, it is hard to be present to it. It's so much easier to step back and to let our minds take over rather than just feel. I've sat with so many people, starting, personally, also as a minister, going through the worst hours of their lives. And sometimes I experience that it's easier for people to just go to the story they create, the rationalization of why this is happening, or the logistics, rather than to just be in the raw terror, or fear, or pain. Because it's overwhelming, it's too much for us. We're in shock. And sometimes, especially in profound grief, loved ones who have died, sometimes it takes many months, sometimes years, to actually just go back to the full experience of the moment I really miss my mother, my father, my spouse, my child. Both of these texts focus on two people who haven't built a story yet. I'm going to share a little bit about these brothers. They're really mad, right? Because this little brother, can you imagine? He's the only one out of 12 that gets the special jacket from his father because he's the favorite. And then he's coming to supervise them as experienced shepherds. And then he tells them about this dream that implies that they're worshiping him and the sun, moon, and stars are bowing down to him. And they're plotting to kill him. And so, as he approaches, they throw him in a cistern in a pit. It's deep, there is no water, it's just rocks. And they say, let's just kill him, or let's just leave him here to die. And then you know what they start doing? They start eating lunch. They're like a few feet away from the cistern. Joseph's down there. He can hear them passing the food. Oh, I'll have a little more chicken, thank you. Have a bit more water. And they start talking about, well, you know, maybe we shouldn't kill him. Maybe we could sell him. Maybe we could get some money. That's practical, because we wouldn't want to kill him and have his blood on our hands. Maybe we could say he just fell and got lost and disappeared. And he's listening. Imagine being in the pit, being Joseph. The utter terror. It's like being buried with the earth not yet covering you up. And this story really disturbs me. It's not so much that they're plotting to kill him. There's something about that meal. They're having a meal together, passing the food, talking about logistics. It's as if nothing happened. I don't think that makes Joseph's brothers monsters. I think it makes them people. It's what we do. In this case, the thing they've caused, they've created. You know, the intense hatred is so unacceptable. It's so much easier to talk about logistics. It's too much to feel all at once. Their love and their hatred for their brother at the same time. Their anger at their father about this favoritism. So the term is called, in psychology, dissociation. I've got to detach myself from it. I've got to compartmentalize it. I have to disconnect from the story, from the idea, from my brother in order to do this thing. It's so much easier to talk, oh, 20 pieces of silver, that's pretty good. We'll sell them for that. We'll sell them to the traders headed toward Egypt. Because logistics are so much easier to hold on to than raw greed and hatred and anger. But for Joseph in that experience, he doesn't have anything to hold on to, just the raw terror that he is going to die here, abandoned. He's 17 years old, and his brothers are having lunch. How many of you know the story, how it ends with Joseph? Yeah, it's so easy to rush to that place, isn't it? Oh, well, you know, all's well that ends well. You know, to rush to, there's Joseph with his dreams that interpret the future, and he gets the ring from the Pharaoh. We can say, oh, well, God has a plan. You know, it was all done for the good. And that's true eventually. But it's not true from inside the pit. Joseph doesn't know he's years into the story that ends in a palace. All he knows is he is terrified, thirsty, hungry, betrayed. And I think skipping to the end too quickly does that similar dissociation. We disconnect from the experience that Joseph, because we're already telling the story, rather than being in the moment. And this is true not just in relationship to this story, but in the story we've constructed about our own lives. Not to attach, but to start with beginner's mind. Experience the experience without the story. I think Joseph's real education doesn't happen the day that Pharaoh puts the ring on him. It happens years before that, and it happens so slowly, in the pit, on the caravan, traveling all the way to Egypt, being imprisoned under Potiphar, and his wife tempting him, and then accusing him of being the one who tempted her. A young man, so many years, without understanding why. And I think that's much closer to the way that we actually change. It's not the spectacular, glamorous event. It's slow. And some of you might be wondering, and what does that story have to do with Jesus walking on the water? In some ways, it's so different because it happens all so quickly, where Joseph's story happens so slowly. Picture the boat, deep in the middle of the night, wind against them for hours. The disciples doing what you do in a small boat at sea under a storm, bailing, gripping, shouting at one another, blaming one another, watching the water instead of each other. And someone looks up and sees a shape on the horizon coming closer, past the bow, and it's walking. That's not what water supports. And each of them reaches for the same word, ghost. Has to be. Because water can't carry that weight. Because that's what our mind does when it runs out of facts, when it runs out of explanations. And Jesus tells them, don't be afraid. And Peter, only Peter, answers with something closer to a dare than a question. If it's you, tell me to come. And Peter climbs out of the boat. 11 men stay seated in that boat that night. There's no shame in that. The boat during a storm is where, staying in the boat is where sane people stay. Peter's out of his mind. One man gets out, willing to test whether the impossible thing in front of him was real. And for a few steps, it held. His foot came down on the water, and the water held him. And then he feels the wind. It's been there the whole time, but he just hasn't sensed it yet. This is the first moment he notices it. The moment that his attention turns from this man, this ghost, this apparition in front of him, to the situation he's actually in, becomes self-conscious. He remembers his own weight and the water that a moment ago was holding him up, and it simply stops. I've read and heard so many interpretations of this story, these two stories, as a lack of faith. As though Peter failed some tests that the other 11 had passed because they stayed in the boat. But I think that interpretation gets the psychology exactly backward. What happens to Peter is what happens to any of us. The instant we stop being in the present, we stop being carried by the moment, and start watching ourselves instead. The mind reasserting itself in an experience that's too large to hold, without turning it into a story about ourselves. It's not a moral failure. It's what our minds do. question, why did you doubt, comes after the hand reaches out to him in this moment of fear. There's no prerequisite or price of admission for being connected in contact with him, his hand extended. And Jesus doesn't stand at a safe distance to see whether Peter can compose himself and get up again. The reckoning happens afterwards in the boat, and it's gentle. Why did you doubt? Peter didn't have to arrive at calm after the waves stopped. The hand meets him in the terror, exactly how he is, without need to be composed. Pull it together. One thing I take away from this is, it's not the promise that we stop being afraid. The story doesn't say that. I think it says something about being met in the middle of our terror, our fear, our grief, our pain, without having first proven yourself steady enough, strong enough, faithful enough to deserve it. So these two stories, if we put them side by side, two time frames, different stories. One is very long and slow. Joseph is not rescued quickly. It's a process of relationships, competence, and persistence. And in this other story, Peter's rescued in an instant as he cries out. Neither gets an explanation about this. Neither's told secretly it's for their own good or the reason why. What they both receive in very different time frames is contact. Someone, something, willing to meet them where they're at, rather than waiting for them to arrive somewhere else, more presentable. I love that. So which of these two stories might you be living this week? The long, slow journey? Or this place of crisis, the pit? Or sinking under the waves in a storm? Or both? If it's a slow one, where nothing's resolving, on any schedule you can see, perhaps the kindest thing you can offer to yourself is to be with that experience. Or if it's another that you love, to be with them on the edge of the pit, just present. Or perhaps it's the sudden one, the sinking, where your courage got ahead of your nerve. And now you're waiting, simply waiting for a hand. The story doesn't ask us to compose ourselves and arrive at peace before help comes. Both stories ask that we stay connected with what's actually happening long enough for that hand to reach out and find us. So sometime this week, when you're having an experience and then you're attaching that story, that story you tell about your life, stop for a moment and notice that and allow yourself to just experience. Stay with your experience. Because that's where we're found. let's stay with them a little bit more this week in that middle place when we know the story. That unresolved middle. Because I believe that's where most of us spend our lives. Amen.
Please rise as you're able and join in the sermon response, our New Century hymn number 446.